This is Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro. From the corporate office to the cab of a truck, they're here to inspire and empower women in all professions. So gear down, sit back, and enjoy.
Welcome to Women Road Warriors. We're an award-winning show that works to inspire and empower women in every profession. Our goal is to power women on their road to success. We tackle all kinds of topics, and we work to encourage women to be their very best with informative guests and women who've been champions. I'm Shelley.
And I'm Kathy.
No topic is taboo on our show. We tackle the tough topics along with the not-so-tough topics, and we like to feature experts and celebrities who can assist women in being the very best they can be. When a parent has a child with ADHD, it can be beyond challenging. It can impact a child's behavior and seriously hamper learning. The Mayo Clinic says this condition impacts millions of children and can continue into adulthood. Symptoms include difficulty paying attention, hyperactivity, and impulsive behavior. Too often, the answer from doctors is to prescribe Ritalin or other ADHD drugs, which you don't necessarily want your child on. There's a better way to solve this. Dr. Connie McReynolds is a psychologist who's unlocked the answer. She asserts what's holding children back with ADHD is the brain's failure to properly process auditory or visual information. Improving brain function can get it under control. Dr. McReynolds is a certified rehabilitation counselor and podcast host of Roadmap to the Brain. She's the author of a #1 Amazon-selling book called Solving the ADHD Riddle, The Real Cause and Lasting Solutions to Your Child's Struggle to Learn. Dr. McReynolds uses neurofeedback to treat ADHD and has a proven track record of improving symptoms related to it that include anxiety, anger, panic disorder, conduct disorder, depression, cognitive decline, trauma, and PTSD. She's done this successfully with repeatable results. She consults with schools and trains other psychologists on her brain training technology. Dr. McReynolds is with us today, and we're excited to learn more. Welcome, Dr. McReynolds.
Well, Shelley and Kathy, thank you so much for inviting me. I look forward to today's conversation, and I'm just really appreciative of being here today.
Oh, we're the ones that are appreciative. Your insight is invaluable.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, what a godsend what you've discovered. I thought before we begin delving into how you help your patients, we could learn a little bit more about you, Dr. McReynolds.
Sure. I've actually been in the field of rehabilitation psychology for nearly 30 years, and a certified rehabilitation counselor for longer than that. And what I really had discovered early on in my career is that these diagnostic labels really, they just didn't seem to help a whole lot. They didn't help my clients get better. It may help them get in the door to access services or to get some types of insurance coverage at times, but it really didn't tell the story. And I became very curious about that. I come from a long line of teachers. My mother taught second grade for 32 years in the same classroom. And I often say I grew up in second grade watching her as she was really dealing with children. And this was quite some time back when she was dealing with children in the classroom, some of whom had some real difficulty learning. And one little boy, Danny, that I wrote about in the book, couldn't learn to read. And so she, over the summer, took him up to a university teaching center where they discovered he had something called dyslexia, which at that time wasn't really well understood, but she knew he needed help. And I think from that early beginning, and my aunt was a dean of a college of education, so I kind of come from this long line of teachers. And then I became a licensed psychologist. And in that practice, I think I merged those two worlds, a bit of the curiosity, a bit of awareness that much of the psychological process that I was trained in, well, some of it worked, but some of it really didn't seem to make a lasting difference. And so I think that curiosity and the ability to really look at this from different angles is what prompted me along the way.
You know, I think having a mother that was a teacher That really gave you some serious fundamentals and a real good foundation to approach this in a practical fashion. I love the fact that what you're doing can actually help children drug-free. I mean, Ritalin and all of the different stimulants they're on, that's not something parents want to do.
That truly is what I have found in my clinics. A lot of parents who do come have perhaps gone down that road because they were limited in the options that they had. There was pressure from the school in a lot of cases where the child was dysregulated, misbehaving, isn't succeeding in school, and parents sometimes, although they shouldn't be told this, but at times I've been told they need to put their child on medication, and that really, well, it just shouldn't be happening, but
Yeah.
Minus any other alternative, parents are sometimes at a real loss
Sure.
as to what to do. I've had kindergarten children come to my clinics who have been kicked out of kindergarten because of their behaviors. And what is a parent to do with that? If you can't get through kindergarten, what are you going to do?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's been a long time that Ritalin has been in use. In my case, I did not have ADHD, but I remember when I was in 3rd grade, my mother had said the teacher approached her about giving me Ritalin because I was running around the room. And of course, my mother at the conference said, "Tell Shelley to sit down. She's obviously bored. Give her something to do." But the teacher wanted to give me Ritalin, and that would not have been an appropriate thing to do.
Right. Well, and this is really the limitation I think that we sometimes have in our world, because we're so driven to get rid of symptoms. And part of the difficulty with that is we just simply end up chasing symptoms all the time. We never get to the root cause of the problem. And that's what I started seeing in my clinics 15 years ago, is that children were coming in, some of them, I had some children on multiple medications. I had children who had refused to take the medications because they didn't like the side effects. Then there were children, excuse me, who had been down the road with all the behavioral interventions. And if none of these are working, it suggests that perhaps the interventions aren't effective for some children. And that's really what drove the questions, is if these traditional interventions are not working, perhaps why are they not working? And then what do we need to uncover or learn that might help us come up with a different solution? That's really where it all started. As I began looking at these behaviors, I began looking at how the medications were not working for a lot of children, how the behavior interventions seemed to kind of fall on ears that couldn't hear, although it wasn't a hearing problem or a vision problem. And that's when I really started uncovering this fascinating alternative story about auditory and visual processing problems.
So what exactly is happening with ADHD, with the auditory and visual processing problems? What is going on, and what causes ADHD?
Well, the cause of that's a great unknown, because honestly, we have a lot of adults in the world who have ADHD. So I tend to agree with some folks that some of the technology and the amount of technology that some children are exposed to from early on in their life does create certain types of brainwave patterns that lend the brain to want a lot of excitement and entertainment. But we've had ADHD, I think, for a lot longer than anyone really has ever acknowledged. And I believe underneath it all is this very operational factor that before this has not really been spoken of or understood very well. So when I first started uncovering these auditory and visual processing challenges through the use of an assessment, it started matching up with behaviors that parents were describing. And some parents would even say, gosh, what you're describing here and talking about in this report, it sounds just like me, or it sounds like my child's father, or it sounds like my child's mother. I'm wondering if we don't have the same things going on, because when we're dealing with auditory and visual processing problems, I'm looking at 37 areas of this, which if we think about 10 of those not working, that's quite a bit that isn't
yeah.
working, and even 5 significant
Yeah.
ones. If they're not working, this is a big impact in a person's life.
Mm.
So when you said they're processing problems, what's actually happening in the brain?
So the brain really works with neuronal pathways. And what happens at times is that some of these brain waves are well formulated and working like they're supposed to. Some of these, what we have found is that they are weaker. And for what reason, we really don't know. I don't really know. I haven't been able to answer that question, nor have I seen any research that can answer really what's the causal factor of the auditory and the visual. So really, we start with where is the child today, or where is the adult today? What are we dealing with today? And when we, pardon me, when we are looking at these auditory and visual processing problems, we can really see how if a child, I'll use some of the terms from the assessment, if a child doesn't have the auditory vigilance, for example, this auditory vigilance is our ability to remember, if you will, what has just been said to me, to be able to sustain my attention long enough that I don't drift off, I don't lose focus, and that if I drift off for a moment, I can get back on track. A lot of these children don't have those skills. Their brain just simply is not developed in that particular area of functioning. However, they can have 20 other areas that are working great. But if this one area isn't working or is weak, they're going to have trouble tracking what a teacher says in the classroom. They're going to find themselves drifting off. A teacher is going to label them as not paying attention, being inattentive, and a lot of other descriptors in cases. And so do parents. When parents are giving instructions and the child can't follow through, there's a tendency to believe that this is willful behavior, willful drifting off. You're just not paying attention. Sometimes adults get frustrated, and naturally so. Children get frustrated, teachers get frustrated. And when we have all of that going on, this becomes for a very unhappy situation, an unhappy child when this happens day in and day out, because the child doesn't know why people are upset. That child's doing the best they know how. If you have never had auditory vigilance as a strong brain processing capability, you don't know what it is, you cannot describe it, and you can't say what you need. And no one can when they don't know what this is.
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I have one question for you. Do you want to stop worrying about the IRS? If the answer is yes, then look no further. I've been around for years. I've helped countless people across the country, and my success rate speaks for itself. So now you know where to find good, honest help with your tax problems. What are you waiting for? If you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS or haven't filed in years, call me now at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com for a free consultation and get your life back.
Industry movement Trucking Moves America Forward is telling the story of the industry. Our safety champions, the women of trucking, independent contractors, the next generation of truckers, and more. Help us promote the best of our industry. Share your story and what you love about trucking. Share images of a moment you're proud of. And join us on social media. Learn more at truckingmovesamerica.com.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro.
If you're enjoying this informative episode of Women Road Warriors, I wanted to mention Kathy and I explore all kinds of topics that will power you on the road to success. We feature a lot of expert interviews. Plus, we feature celebrities and women who've been trailblazers. Please check out our podcast at womenroadwarriors.com and click on our episodes page. We're also available wherever you listen to podcasts, on all the major podcast channels like Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon Music, Audible, you name it. Check us out and bookmark our podcast. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other sites. And tell others about us. We want to help as many women as possible. Many parents are told that the only way to treat their child's ADHD is to put them on drugs. Dr. Connie McReynolds is the answer to a drug-free solution. She maintains drugs are not always the answer. Part of the difficulty is symptoms are being treated instead of getting to the root cause. Dr. McReynolds has a different solution. She uses a brain training technology that's been highly effective as a drug-free alternative to help children with ADHD. She recognizes that people with ADHD have auditory and visual processing difficulties. There's actually a weak or undeveloped area of their neural pathways. Her treatments help with that. Dr. McReynolds, it's interesting that this hasn't been looked at as in-depth as you have. Because it would make sense that you want to know what the heck is happening with the brain.
Right.
Now, what you offer as a solution, you use neurofeedback. Does that actually change the neural pathways, or what exactly is happening there?
Actually, neurofeedback is also known as EEG biofeedback. And a lot of people have heard of the term biofeedback, which, back in the day when it first came on, we would use little clip-on sensors on your finger to measure your pulse rate and maybe your respiration. And we could teach people how to alter that so that they could, be more relaxed. Neurofeedback is an extension beyond that. It was actually developed in the 1970s at UCLA by Dr. Barry Sterman. And so we have a good 50 years of research on this. This isn't new. It's using the electroencephalogram, which is why we call it EEG unit, that uses a little sensor we place on the scalp in a certain location to measure brain waves. By measuring the brain waves, it's all considered non-invasive, which means we are not doing anything to the brain. The brain is simply in what we call an operant learning condition, where the brain learns and is strengthened by repetition. So when we find these areas of weakness, we're measuring brain waves at a certain location. Those brain waves are fed into the computer in an almost instantaneous manner. And these video games that have been designed specifically for these particular training opportunities are developed and set up in a program for a child or an adult. And through the repetition of that, the brain learns how to strengthen the muscle in that area, if you will. It's actually a neuronal pathway. And when we think about neuronal pathways, everything we know how to do today, from holding a pencil to driving a big rig, has been learned through operant conditioning.
Okay.
So you have to practice, in other words. So it's practice. And when we set up a training plan, it is very much, I kind of dub it, this is like a gym for the brain. So the child comes in and goes to the brain gym activity, if you will, and it becomes kind of a way to boost brain function in a non-invasive manner. And so by doing that, we're strengthening those areas that we've identified that are weaker because we've figured out which ones are weak. And so we train those. And through the process of usually about 20 hours of the EEG biofeedback, the neurofeedback, the brain is strengthened. And we use these assessments at the beginning to get the baseline. And after every 10 hours of completed brain training, we'll reassess. Because after 10 hours, there will be changes. The brain will typically have improved in areas. And then we're looking at, are there any remaining areas that could be strengthened? And perhaps we'll do another training plan and strengthen those areas and then reassess. And what is so amazing about this is the long-lasting outcome and results that are achieved with this. I have parents and people that I've worked with 10 years ago that come back and are still coming back periodically and saying, I just want you to know my brain just keeps getting better and better. And the reason for this is because those neuronal pathways have been strengthened. And because they've been strengthened, they're being used more. The more we use something, the stronger it gets. So it becomes a perpetuating cycle forward of continued strengthening. and it's an ongoing, beautiful solution to this mysterious and sometimes what I kind of call the riddle of ADHD, which is we haven't been able to find viable solutions that create lasting solutions using these traditional interventions.
You really have a lifeline for both
Wow.
the children
Yeah.
as well as the parents. Wow.
This works. And
I believe it. They have I remember, sorry, I was way back, I was nursing in Alzheimer's units. And when the resident would first come to the unit, there was the occupational therapist that would have these brain games for that would supposedly really help with the I guess the prevention of the rapidly evolving Alzheimer's. So apparently these games they really worked, and so they were highly recommending to the families to use these specific games way before, like if they would have certain events, to start using these games as soon as you start to recognize signs of symptoms of Alzheimer's. That's when you need to really force it, like use it for quite a few hours regularly. And apparently it really does work, and I believe in it. Honestly, I do. Yeah.
Well, all of this is tied to the concept of neuroplasticity, which has been around since Donald Heeb, a Canadian psychologist, introduced this back in 1949. So we've understood at some level, in some realms, that the brain is completely rewirable, no matter how old we are. Now, after certain amounts of damage.
I did EMDR. Are you aware of that?
Yeah,
I am.
What that is?
Yep.
Yeah, I did that when I was in treatment for alcohol, and it was literally to rewire the brain. And this is back in 2012 when it was just kind of, in the addiction world anyway, they were just trying it. So I was kind of like a guinea pig. I mean, I'm in treatment. What else do I got to lose? I'm like, sure. A lot of the girls didn't want to try it, but I'm like, bring it on, right? If it's going to help me, I'm going to do it. And I was, apparently it had a 75% rate of success specifically for alcoholics. So I did that program, I think it was once a week for something like six or 7 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. And I gotta say that as it actually, for me, it worked, because when she was going back and forth into memories and certain triggers, well, I finally understood certain things, and I've been fine ever since. It's been 11 and a half years since then, and I haven't had a drink. And something shifted in my way of thinking. I can't explain it. It's just, there was a shift.
Right?
Yes. And that's the beauty of how the brain really can work when we learn how to actually harness the power of our brain. And some of the difficulties we have is that this just isn't well known yet. And it's kind of a mystery to me in some cases why we haven't. I think there are some reasons. But the big news is, let's get the word out. Let's let people know, like this program's going to do, that we have viable solutions to these problems where we're just tackling the symptoms. And that's where these behavioral interventions. So imagine if I have auditory processing problems, which could mean I have trouble remembering what someone tells me to do, and I am at school and they're implementing behavioral interventions and they're telling me these things I'm supposed to remember to do. And what happens when I don't remember? Well, it doesn't work. And therein lies a lot of the difficulty with these behavioral interventions, is if I can't remember what someone's asking me to do, how can I do something differently?
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
Trucking Moves America Forward, or TMAF, is building a positive image of trucking by telling the story of the hardworking drivers and industry professionals who support the industry. And you can be a part of it. Learn more about TMAF and how you can join and be a part of the industry movement working to build a strong image of trucking by visiting TMAF's website at truckingmovesamerica.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our latest channel, TikTok.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro.
Neurofeedback is something Dr. Connie McReynolds has used with great success to treat and help with ADHD. She consults with schools and physicians in this drug-free alternative. She's the author of the book Solving the ADHD Riddle, the real cause and lasting solutions to your child's struggle to learn. The brain learns and is strengthened by repetition through Dr. McReynolds' specialized training. The brain can rebuild a neuronal pathway that's weak, which is part of the symptomology of ADHD. Dr. McReynolds can see results in 20 hours of treatment, and the long-lasting outcomes are outstanding. She's had patients who've come back to tell her their brains are just getting better and better. It's a matter of harnessing the healing power of the brain to overcome deficiencies. Dr. McReynolds, what are you actually seeing when you're seeing the deficiency in perhaps auditory or visual responses in the brain? What is it the computer's actually seeing? Is there an area that's undeveloped in the brain, or what's blocking those pathways?
I think that's a really interesting question. I don't do brain scanning. I don't need to, because we use this other type of computer-based assessment that helps me identify those areas of processing weakness. So I know that there are some folks that do the brain scanning, and there's some good research out there, some good MRI studies that show these different areas of weakness. And I think some parents, can benefit from that type of information. Other parents may not have access to that. And so part of what, I have really focused on is, let's look at really what we can do, which we know these neuronal pathways are weak. We know they're not functioning in the manner that they should. And there could be as many reasons as there are people on the planet for maybe why that is occurring for individuals. The key, I think, for us is that we focus really on where this person is right now, and let's solve the problem. Let's get at this. Let's get to the causal, to the root of it. And we're able to do that through the neurofeedback. And I think I have up on my website, or on a couple of my websites that might be out there. I certainly do it in some of the trainings. I have video clips that actually show, neuronal pathways connecting, shows how these neurons actually connect in the brain. And then, for example, bad habits, how we're able to prune away those old connections that we don't want anymore because we're building new connections. And so it's fascinating from that standpoint to know that we really are affecting change in our brains. And Kathy, like you noted, it changed something in your brain, in your wiring. So there was something that was cleared, or something that was released, or something that was connected that made things different for you going forward.
This could have, what you're doing, Dr. McReynolds, benefits in so many different areas. Addiction, people even with Alzheimer's, I would think, could benefit.
Yes. And interesting, kind of a little side note here that might be of interest to your listeners is, a couple of years ago, a son brought his 82-year-old mother to the clinic because he noted that she was having a few memory problems. We tested her, and yes, we noted that, yes, there were some memory difficulties, and she did 20 hours of neurofeedback over a course of a few weeks. And one day she came in, and she was just kind of beaming from ear to ear. And I asked her what was going on, and she said, and her son was there, and he was smiling. And they had just been to her general practitioner, her GP, and she had gone in for a follow-up visit. So she had seen him right before she came to see us. And she went back 6 months later, and he did another assessment on her, a cognitive functioning assessment. And he looked at her the second time, and he said, "Okay, what have you been doing?" And she said, "Well, what do you ask?" And he said, "Because when you were last here 6 months ago, you were on the verge of early onset dementia. And I was prepared today to tell you that you had entered into dementia." He said, "Whatever you have been doing, you have completely reversed this, and you've improved your score several points. You are no longer on the verge of that."
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
I had no idea that she was on the verge of that diagnosis. We tested her for memory. And yes, she had some weakness there and she had improved. And he had no idea she was coming for neurofeedback. And we celebrated.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. What a
Yeah.
victory. That is
Mhm.
miraculous.
It was a good game-changing day for us. And I
Yeah.
actually now have opened a clinic inside a retirement center here in Southern California to try and help more individuals who might be struggling.
Where are your facilities? Are they across the nation? I mean, I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of people saying, how do I access this?
Well, the good news is that about 2 years ago, the software developer, I was having a conversation with him during our, world tour of COVID, I guess we could say. And I was telling him that I had children who couldn't get in, and we had people who were really struggling and they could not get to my clinics. And so he developed a system to where I can now deliver neurofeedback to wherever a person sits. So we can provide, and have been doing so for almost 2 years now, what I call the remote neurofeedback services.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
So we do the assessments and we run the programs, the same as if a person were sitting in my clinics. There's a little bit different setup process on that and fees associated with that because we have the equipment and such that we have to lease out and ship out. And licenses and such, but we're getting the same results. And I actually even worked with someone in Switzerland earlier this year.
This is a game changer in so many
Wow.
different treatment areas. I am super impressed.
Well, I'm so excited that we're able to start talking about this in, a different venue and arena. I've written about it. I've published in professional journals and such. But really, this is about, folks like you being able to connect with your listenership and letting them know that there are these alternatives. There are different ways of being able to solve these problems. And there's hope out there. And that's what I really see so much in parents and adults and our older population. When we find these auditory and visual processing problems, we have people that know they have memory problems. And it's like, what can we do to make this different? And there is something we can do. And we have a pretty good track record. Everyone's a little bit different. The process that everyone goes through, their brains are unique. So each person's going to have a little bit of their own, I guess you could say, experience with it, with how their brain responds. And some people respond more quickly than others. We've actually also tackled some mild and moderate autism.
Okay. I was going to ask about that. Okay.
So part of, again, what we're looking at, and it doesn't mean these diagnoses are incorrect. It just means perhaps what we're finding is some underlying contributing factors in the case of autism. I've actually had children come in diagnosed with autism that when I met with them, I thought, this doesn't seem to fit for me. I don't think this is what we're dealing with. I'm not going to countermand someone else's diagnosis, but I am going to do our own assessment and figure out what's going on. And when we learn that there's a ton of auditory and visual processing problems, it's like, well, let's take care of this and then see where this child is. And in many cases, if you have very poor auditory processing, you have poor visual processing, a child with visual processing problems is going to be disorganized. They're going to be messy. They're going to forget where they put their shoes, where they put their toothbrush, where the keys are. They're going to forget to feed the dog. They're going to trip and bump into things. They may have poor eye-hand coordination. When they're writing, it could be really sloppy and messy. They may miss things. They just are not visually tuned into their world because for some reason that visual processing isn't working. Well, imagine this child sitting in a classroom trying to take notes or pay attention to what someone is putting up on a whiteboard. They're going to be lost. And so I've got some of these stories that I put in the book about these children that came in that were not functioning well. And when we uncover and then strengthen these areas of weakness, these children go on and do well. We had one teenager who I knew his father, and his father called me one day and said, we've got a real problem. And asked him what was going on. And his teenage son had been in special education his entire K-12 experience. He was in high school, and one day he was sitting in the library and was just incredibly bored and just decided to hack the school's computer system that day.
Oh, gosh.
So here was this child who'd been labeled, and there's nothing wrong with special education. It's a good program. I've come up, I work in rehab, so I get it. But we need to have the right children in the right place. And he was not in the right place. He was not getting the right supports. And he was a very angry teenager. And he was expelled from that school. We did neurofeedback on him. He obviously was in another school the next year. He scored the highest in the school's history on the state math exam the next year.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he used to like to joke. He said, I'm the poster child for special education.
Stay tuned for more of Women Road Warriors coming up.
Kathy Tuccaro is nothing short of amazing. She not only drives the world's biggest truck as a heavy equipment operator in northern Alberta, Canada. She's an international motivational speaker and the author of Dream Big, an autobiography about overcoming a lifetime of trauma and abuse that led to dreams of success. Kathy inspires people the world over to change their lives and improve their self-worth. Her book will change your life. She's passionate about personal growth and believes anyone can change their circumstances and overcome their obstacles if they believe in themselves. Her life will amaze you and seriously inspire you. Be sure to order a copy of her book, Dream Big, on Amazon.com. Industry movement Trucking Moves America Forward is telling the story of the industry, our safety champions, the women of trucking, independent contractors, the next generation of truckers, and more. Help us promote the best of our industry. Share your story and what you love about trucking. Share images of a moment you're proud of. And join us on social media. Learn more at truckingmovesamerica.com.
Welcome back to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro.
The amazing drug-free neurofeedback treatments Dr. Connie McReynolds uses for ADHD is helping thousands of patients. It's also shown potential for treating and improving other disorders and diseases like Alzheimer's and autism. Dr. McReynolds is the author of Solving the ADHD Riddle, the real cause and lasting solutions to your child's struggle to learn. She's been sharing her amazing information with us. Dr. McReynolds, these are just tremendous outcomes. What is your success rate? I'm sure that there are going to be some listeners saying, is it a high percentage or they want to be convinced, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Because they've heard so many different things.
Well, and there have been a lot of claims about a lot of things out there, and everyone should be wise and careful for what they get into. What I say is, we've been doing this for 15 years. I'm a professor at a university, recently retired, a licensed psychologist, certified rehabilitation counselor. I used to work at the VA in my dog program, working with veterans. I've published on my work with that. I've published results on children with ADHD and other kinds of venues. And is it 100%? I don't know of anything that is 100%.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say is that we are in the high 80s percent. So we have a strong track record. And the reason that I can say that is because we used evidence-based assessments to look at progress, as well as within the system that the person is using for their training program. We measure their progress in every session. That's documented, that we track. And then we also are tracking how is the person generalizing this or transferring this, in other words, to their daily life. Are there differences in their daily lives that they're living? Who's noticing the differences? Parents will sometimes notice, sometimes the child will notice. I had one case early on where we'd been working with one little boy, and his mother was not really too convinced that we had really affected any change. And then she went to a family reunion. And she came back and she said she stood corrected because everyone in the family came up to her and wanted to know what she had done to her son because he was so much better behaved at the family function. And part of what had happened is the change had happened gradually enough that she had actually kind of forgotten what his behaviors were like prior to starting the neurofeedback and completing it. But her relatives had not forgotten. And so the outcomes are measurable. We're always looking for how does this translate to a person's life? And I'll have parents come in, and it isn't an uncommon response. He was struggling in school, or she was struggling in school, and now the grades are improving, and we're spending less time fighting over the homework. That's part of the problem. Because if you have a child with auditory and visual processing problems, and you're trying to teach at home and you're trying to teach in the classroom, and they can't remember what's going on, by improving that area of brain processing to where a child can now remember, you're going to have different outcomes.
Sure you are.
It's just that simple. When we get these pathways working, we use the concept of neuroplasticity. We use the tried and true understood process of operant conditioning that helps the brain be trained in the way we've learned everything that we've ever done, which is through repetition. Then it really, developing the programs, the person that developed our programs, he said it is rocket science from their end. From our end, it isn't. From our end, we don't have to worry about the rocket science. We're just looking at what isn't working and what can we do to strengthen that. And then once it's strengthened, does it last? And it tends to last.
This is so
You
straightforward.
said earlier, it is. I just want to comment. You said earlier about how this has been going undiagnosed for a lot longer than you think. I had a coworker in her mid 40s. She just a few years ago, she came up to me and she said, "Kathy, I finally got the answer." And I'm like, "What answer to what question? Like, what are you talking about?" And she said, "I've been finally diagnosed with ADHD in mid 40s." And I'm like, "What?" She says, she said, "I've been wondering what's been wrong with me my entire life." And she says, now that I finally got assessed by whatever, she said it's finally makes sense as to why I have such a hard time learning and behaviors and whatnot. But she started on medication, however. I think I'm going to connect her with you.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely.
Because she still struggles with certain things at work and stuff. So I think so that made me think, if she was like that, because we're not Generation X, but I'm 54, she was like what, 48 or something. So how many other adults have spent their whole life wondering what the heck is wrong with them, and why am I so different than people? Well, maybe that's because it was just never diagnosed.
I think that's a very true situation. I've worked with a number of adults who have come in. I had one gentleman in his 50s that came in a few years back. We assessed him, and he had quite a few auditory and visual processing problems. And when I went over that with him, he literally started tearing up. And he said, "I finally now know why I had such a hard time keeping jobs, because I could never remember what my boss was asking me to do. And I always thought it was because I wasn't smart enough." And I said, "This has nothing to do with intelligence." And that's where we end up with a lot of children being directed into programs that are not going to be very effective, because it's presumed that it's one condition, when in essence, it may be something completely different that only looks like a different type of a condition. And if we have the wrong diagnosis, we're not very well going to be able to find the right intervention.
Absolutely. This is a game changer. I am really excited.
Oh, this is fabulous.
Yeah, it really is, Dr. McReynolds. Now, is this covered by insurance? I know that's going to be one of the questions that people have.
I will say some insurances will cover it and some don't. Some will cover any form of biofeedback. And that's the word and the term I ask people to use when they call their insurance companies. I'm a fee for service, because I really can't deal with insurance companies, across different categories. And I don't diagnose. So I just want to be clear about that. We just are looking at the auditory and the visual processing problems, and we're looking at it from a rehabilitation standpoint that we can just train the brain. So they would need, if they need a diagnosis with an insurance company, they would need to get that somewhere else for services, but a lot of people can do that. And I'm fee for service, so we just have it set up that most people just pay through their online banking system for this, and we make it easy for people to do that. I try and keep our rates down as low as possible because people need this.
Where are you located?
So I am located in Southern California. And so I have 2 offices, actually 3, one in a retirement center down in Riverside. And then I have 2 clinics, one in Rancho Cucamonga and one in Redlands. And again, I mean, if you can come in, if you are local and can come in, obviously, we like that. We like to be able to see people in person and work with them. But if you're 100 miles or 1,000 or 5,000 or more miles away, that isn't feasible. But as we've learned over the last 3 years and through a lot of technology now that has so significantly improved, we're able to deliver this virtually anywhere.
This really is a godsend.
Fabulous. Oh my God. Yeah.
There's so many conditions you can treat: ADHD, anger, anxiety, autism, Alzheimer's, perhaps, as you mentioned, the wonderful success you had with one of your patients, conduct disorder, depression, OCD conditions, trauma, PTSD. This is just a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
I want to direct people to your website, as well as where they can find your book, certainly about ADHD that we were talking about too.
Sure. My website is www.conniemcreynolds.com. And the book link is on the front page of the homepage of that website, and my contact information. They can fill out an online form. My phone number is also listed on there. And I'm happy to talk with people. I mean, I do brief consults on the phone for about 15 minutes with folks just to see if this is where they want to go. Phone intakes and such. I do all the screening for that, and I do all the intakes for all of this. So we're happy to help in whatever way we can and just make a difference in people's lives and let them know that there is something else out there for them.
Oh, you're changing lives. I'm in awe. It's so needed.
Me too. I'm completely speechless. This is fabulous.
It's like, wow, you just made sense out of everything that so many doctors and so many practitioners and teachers missed. I wish you'd been around when my mother had encephalitis.
Yes.
I had 0 answers. I talked to neurologists. I talked to specialists. They're like, we don't know. I'm like, okay, if you don't, I don't,
I know it really has been a lot of frustration for a lot of people for a very long time. And if there's a segment of the population that we can help and we can do so, that's why we're here. That's what the clinic is about. That's what my business is about. That's what really the company is about and what my mission is about. It's really letting people know that there are alternatives for a lot of conditions. There are ways the brain can improve, and rehabilitation, cognitive rehab, stroke folks, this is actually used in hospitals to help folks who are recovering from stroke and other types of conditions in rehab hospitals. This is known. And the military has used this to help returning veterans. I've worked with a number of veterans. We had a really good project funded by a local county VA for a number of months here, 3 years actually, where they covered the cost for veterans in the area. We enlisted the help of veterans to reach other veterans. And I ended up opening a second clinic about an hour east of my Redlands clinic. And we ran that for quite some time and helping veterans be able to reduce the impact of the trauma. And I continue to work with veterans. So I am actually contracted with Tri-West. So veterans local to this area who can get to the clinics, we have the option of being able to provide them for the VA covering that. Pardon me. We don't have clearance yet to do the remote or telehealth with them for getting the equipment, but honestly, if a veteran wanted to cover that front end piece and then the rest of the services were covered, we might be able work that out. Again, that would have to be, worked out through the VA and the Tri-West contract. But for those folks local to our area here, they come in, and I'm working with veterans.
This is wonderful. You're providing hope. You're the hope everybody's needed. This is terrific.
Well, I appreciate being here and being able to share this, because that's the only way people are going to know that there are options available. And so, being here with the two of you today, I think, is a really good start in letting people know there are these options, that we're here, that we have a proven track record, and that we do have some ways of assisting some segments of the population, and maybe improving their quality of life and getting answers where they haven't had any before.
What is your website again, Dr. McReynolds? Just in case people didn't write it down.
www, and I'll just spell it out. It's a little bit of a long name. ConnieMcReynolds.com. So my name, ConnieMcReynolds.com.
This is terrific. Thank you so much for being on the show, Dr. McReynolds.
Well, Shelley and Kathy, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to be here today and just help get the word out. So thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this latest episode. And if you want to hear more episodes of Women Road Warriors or learn more about our show, be sure to check out womenroadwarriors.com. And please follow us on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. On our website, we also have a selection of podcasts just for women. There are a series of podcasts from different podcasters. So if you're in the mood for women's podcasts, just click the Power Network tab on womenroadwarriors.com. You'll have a variety of shows to listen to anytime you want to. Podcasts made for women. Women Road Warriors is on all the major podcast channels like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Audible, YouTube, and others. So check us out, and please follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Women Road Warriors with Shelley Johnson and Kathy Tuccaro. If you want to be a guest on the show or have a topic or feedback, email us at sjohnson@womenroadwarriors.com.